Welcome to the Fifth Trooper Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fifth Trooper Podcast, Beginner's Guide to Star Wars Legion. My name is Jay Shalansky, and I will be your host and guide. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about understanding the game. On today's episode, we're going to be really looking at a 10,000 mile view of how to play the game and understanding the game. And then over the next few podcasts, we'll be breaking down each particular area of the game and getting a more detailed view into that. But before we begin, I'd just like to remind you that we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/thefifthtrooper. We have an After Dark podcast where we talk about Legion, unfiltered and uncensored. And also we have a web store where we sell tons of Legion accessories that are custom made by us. Really excited. We're going to actually be having a bunch more here in the next few weeks. And would love for you guys to help support us so that we can continue making great podcasts like this and Notorious Scoundrels. All right, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and pop into this episode? So, I think I'm going to kind of go a little ad hoc here and talk about understanding what the game is and what you can expect from the game. Now, I'm probably going to try to speak from more of an 800 point. I'm going to say competitive, but I don't mean this in like you have to go out and play competitive. I just mean 800 points standard format that I would say a majority of people play. You can play the 3x3 format and skirmish mode, but the rules in skirmish, though good, I think it could probably be cleaned up a little bit more before we start talking in detail about it. So we're going to focus on 800 points. So let's talk simply about what is the objective of this game. And simply put, your objective is to battle an opponent and to secure objectives. And when I mean secure, it doesn't mean to grab an objective. It could be anything. It could be, like bombing run, getting bombs close to your opponent's deployment zone and blowing them up to get a victory point. You're really trying to earn those victory points. Now, the interesting thing, and I'll say this here at the beginning, and I think we'll talk about this more as the podcast goes on, is there's a lot of ways to play this game. And some of them are focusing on the objectives, but some of them could potentially be focusing on just annihilating your opponent off the board, right? Now, that isn't as common in this game. It does happen, so for people who have done it before, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's just not a common way of winning this game. So it just all depends on your army makeup and what you want to do, what you want to do as a player, really, and how you're going to approach the game. We have the battle decks, and those have your objectives in there to earn you those victory points. Sometimes, one of them is breakthrough, which is just getting to your opponent's, deployment zone. And so there's multiple ways to kind of win a game, and you kind of have to take each game separately. You have to understand your army, but then each game is going to be different because your opponent could have a different army. The objective deck is going to be different. The battlefield deck is going to be different. And so, just making sure you understand what your army can and can't do, and then how do you approach that particular game with the options that you were given during the objectives battlefield selection part of the game. So in general, with Legion, there's kind of at the 800 point level, there's two different things that end a game. Well, three. Concession of your opponent, right? They can concede if they don't feel like they can continue on. It's 6 rounds. So 6 rounds is my turn, your turn. That's a round, and then 6 of those. And then the last one, especially if you're going to be playing in a tournament style event, even at your local store, is time. And time generally from an event standpoint is 2.5 to 3 hours. That's the time allotment for a game of Legion. I will say though, at home, you should be prepared for upwards, especially if you're newer, you're going to want to prepare for about 4 hours. That's the, between deployment, setup, gameplay, rules clarifications during the game, because if this is only like your 4th or 5th game, there's definitely rules you may not know. Hell, I've been playing for 2 years and there's still rules I have to look up, just because sometimes when you're playing a new unit and it's not something you've been focusing on yet, you have to go back to that rules reference guide and kind of reread. So that's, your kind of objectives and time that you'll have, and how much time you'll have to secure your objectives. The next thing I kind of want to talk about is understanding the ranks. And this is real quick. So we're gonna have another cast talking about building an army, but I'm just gonna go through your minimums. So each rank, commander, corps, operative, special forces, support, and heavy, have a minimum that you have to put in of that rank in order to build an 800-point army. You can go to any of the list builders out there for Legion. We have one, legionhq.thefifthtrooper.com, that'll help you build and give you warning signs. There's plenty of other ones. I encourage you to use any one that makes sense to you and how you build lists. But to go over it simply, there is a minimum and maximum for every core unit, or every unit in an 800-point army. So we'll start with commander. You have to have one commander. So if we're talking about Empire, there's multiple commanders, there's generic commanders, there's named commanders. You have to put one of them in your army no matter what. And you have a maximum of only 2. So that's your min-max for commander. Your core units, so that's your stormtroopers, rebel troopers, droid, B1 droids, B2 droids, etc. You have a minimum of 3. You have to have at least 3 core units in the game in order to have a legal 800-point list. Your maximum is going to be 6. Okay, so you can only have 6. Now, this min-max is all dependent on points as well, right? So if you got it, it's kind of a math equation to figure it out. Operatives, that's Boba Fett, Bossk, Sabine, Cad Bane. You got a minimum of 0, so you don't have to have any operatives in your list, but you can only have 2. There's some wonky ways that could work, especially with like Lando and K2SO and them, that you may have more, but maximum is 2 ranks of that. Special forces, again, minimum is 0. So these are snipers, death troopers, Wookiees. Your minimum is 0. Your maximum is 3. Now, with Entourage, you could have potentially 4, because Entourage, on the Empire side, you have, let's say Palpatine. He entourages the IRG, the Royal Guard. They don't count as a rank, so you could have 3 snipers in IRG for 4 special forces. Your support, so any of your ATRTs, speeder bikes, droidicas, minimum 0, maximum 3. Your heavy units, so I think those are all the tanks, airspeeder, that sort of stuff. You have a minimum of 0, so you don't have to have any, but you can only have up to 2. That's as of today, right? So 2021, February 2021, that's the rules today. Those could change potentially, but as of today, that's kind of your min-max for each one of your units. So again, basic kind of stuff. When you look at your cards, so each unit has a unit card. In the upper right hand corner, you'll see a picture of the unit, and to the left of that is going to tell you its rank with a symbol, and then the number of minis that come in that unit. So for instance, with stormtroopers, they are a rank of a triangle, which is a core unit, and they come with 4 minis. Then on your left-hand side, starting at the upper left, you'll have your faction symbol. You'll have the point cost of that unit. And then you're going to have upgrade slots. So these are all the extras that you can have for that. And now that's going to change your point value, because you add your point values of all your upgrades you're adding on to that unit. So that's kind of how you determine your points for that 800-point army is, I recommend using a list builder, really easy. The other thing is, I'm going to put it in air quotes, the competitive scene, the rules reference guide have some erratas and points changes, and the list builders reflect that. So if you go to Legion HQ, you can see the updated points. We have those in there, and we have the updated keywords so that you know what the errata of that card is. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on that. I would recommend always using list builders for points and building out your armies just so you're up to date, because you're going to find maybe you're putting it all together at home based on the cards, and some units are cheaper. So even though you've built an 800 point army, you could potentially have built a 650 point army, right? And so, you want to I would use list builders. Unless you don't care and you're just playing for fun, then you do you. So the next thing we want to talk about is basically setting up the table. I know we talked about terrain briefly last week, but basically, most mats and tables are going to be in a 6 foot by 4 foot because that's traditionally been the size. Legion is a 6 foot by 3 foot. So what a lot of us do is we just mark off 6 inches on either side of the mat on the long side and just fight within, put the battle within the inside of that 6 by 3 and then use that 6 inches for cards. We have sidebars, for instance, that you can lay down for your cards. And then what you want to do is you could do it one of two ways. In a tournament style setting at a store, terrain is going to be already preset, hopefully. But if you're at home, you can set it up with your friend. And basically, you're just going to want to go back and forth on setting and declaring terrain. And so what I mean by declaring is there's 2 types of cover, heavy and light covers. So something like the barricades that come in the core box will grant you heavy cover. You can declare, let's say you have little containers or boxes, shipment boxes or something that are small, or fences. Those would be light cover. So basically cover at its base is heavy cover takes away 2 standard hits, and light cover takes away 1. Now surges can convert to crits, which would override that, and then crits would also override that. So, you want to have about 25 to 30% of your table with terrain. You want to have good line of sight blocking, heavy light cover. You want to have a good mix of everything there. So then what you want to do is you've built your list, you've put together the table. You're going to determine who's red or blue. And basically, red or blue player is determined by your point cost of your army. So if you have less points, let's say your opponent has 800 and you have 795, you get to choose to be blue or red player. Most people choose blue. There are instances, depending on your army, to choose red. And then there's a lot of things throughout the game that we'll talk about later that influence that choice. A quick one is going first during the battlefield selection, right? And either choosing to flip a card or pass. Blue player gets to go first. Blue player gets to choose side of the table. So, you just be conscious of that when building your army. So you've got your army built, you've got your table set, you've determined who's red and blue player. Well, now you're going to define the battlefield. So blue player is going to use their deck of battlefield cards. There's 3 types. There's battlefield, so that's your deployment zones. There's condition, which is kind of things that are happening in the environment, or maybe one of the conditions is that your commanders can only their command reach is only a certain distance instead of the full range 3. It's I think it's range 1 now, and you use his courage value within that. So just make sure you read those cards, and when you're building your battle deck, you put 4 of each type. So you have a battlefield condition, and then your objectives, which stuff like breakthrough, key positions. You need 4 cards of each type. You shuffle them, draw out 3, put the extra ones away, and you should be stacking them on the battlefield or to the side somewhere so that both players can read the cards. Then starting with the blue player, they can either pass or they can flip a card to say that they're not going to use that card for this game. And you take turns back and forth until you've both gone twice. And then whatever is on the table, so you should have a battlefield row, a condition row, and then an objective row. And so whatever is the first going from left to right after you've flipped some cards or passed, that's determination of what the battlefield condition and objective are going to be. The next thing you're doing, and this is something that when you're building your army you're going to do, is build your command hand. These are the orders that basically your commander is giving to the army. Now, there's rules to this as well. Hopefully here soon, the 2 new Clone Wars sets, the clones and droids should be getting generic cards, command cards. But right now, you basically have a set of generic command cards, 3 plus standing orders, which is your 4th one, and then each commander has 3 cards. And so you need to be able to build a command hand. There should be 7 cards in it. Everyone has to have standing orders, which is 4. It has 4 dots in the upper left-hand corner. These are called pips. This is the bidding system to determine who goes first. Each commander should have a 1 pip, a 2 pip, and a 3 pip. And then you should have generic, right now, the Empire and Rebels have more, but for Clone Wars, you have ambush, push, and assault. And they basically, if you're looking at the card, the top left corner shows you the pip, or what you're going to be betting. The lower the number, the more likely you are to go first. And then to the right of that is the name. And then below the image on the card, right below the image, you'll see it'll say 2 units or 2 troopers or General Grievous. That's going to tell you who you can give orders to. And then below that is text that some command cards have special conditions that they apply to the battlefield. And so you just want to make sure you're looking at all that. One of the key things to note from a command hand phase is try not to focus on what the special abilities of the command card are. Focus more on the pip and understanding how your army is going to work and who you're going to need to give orders to when. So you kind of want to think out the phases of the game, look at your battlefield deck, understand what could potentially be happening, and who you're going to want to give orders to when. So that's your command hand, and like I said, we're gonna dive into these a little bit as we move forward with the podcast. We'll get into deeper content on this. So the next thing we're gonna do is the command phase. So like I said, your command hand is 7 cards. It's hidden from your opponent. They don't know what command cards you have. They can guess, based off of just what you brought to the table. It gets harder as more if you have more commanders and operatives in your list. It also gets harder as the next wave of generic commanders come out here in a month or so. And so what you're going to do is at the beginning of your turn, you're basically going to pick a card determining, sometimes you may want to go first, so you may want to put a 2 pip. Sometimes you don't care who goes first and you don't want to waste one of your higher pip cards, so you put down standing orders and you only give an order to 1 unit. It's all dependent on the battlefield, the setup, and what you're looking at. So once you've determined your command card, you and your opponent put them face down on the table and you flip them at the same time. Whoever has the lower pip gets to go first. They have to give the orders, which is taking an order token for that unit, placing it face up next to that unit. They have to give those orders first, then you give your orders. And then if they had the lower pip, they get to go first. And so the next basic thing that you're going to be doing is your activation phase. So you say, okay, I have these B1 droids. I'm going to activate them. Now, there's 4 things that you can do. You can move, you can attack, you can aim, and you can dodge. The only thing you can do twice, because during your activation you get 2 actions, the only one of those 1, 2, 3, 4 actions that you can do is move twice. You can't do anything else twice unless there's a card or an ability that says, you can do, you get a dodge token, or like Son of Skywalker, after your activation actions, you may take an additional attack, right? So there's contingencies and different options out there, but really the only thing you can do is move twice. The rest of them you can only do once. Moving is with the movement tools. So once you move, depending on the speed, so if we're using B once, you move speed 2, and you'll see on the right-hand side of your unit card, below the green and yellow numbers, you're going to see these red dashes. That's your speed. So if you have 2 red dashes, you move speed 2. So once you move speed 2 and you move, you then have to make sure that your unit is in cohesion. So, and actually this, even before you move, when you deploy, your unit has to be in cohesion. And what cohesion is you take your unit leader, you can take a speed 1 movement tool, and basically anywhere within a circle around your unit leader with a speed 1 tool, with a unit at the end of the speed 1 tool, that's your cohesion bubble. So your entire unit has to be within that circle, 360 degrees. You can put them all on one side, all on the other side, all behind, all in front. That's going to be dependent on what you want to do. But, your units always have to be in cohesion. So the other thing is you could do is attack. So quickly, there's range rulers in there. There are these 6-inch long sticks, basically, that you can attach together, and that checks your range. You always check your range when attacking from your unit leader. Range generally is always from the unit leader, unless it is healing or healing bots or other effects that say otherwise. Then you would check it from your unit. But range for attacking is always from your unit leader. So you see if an enemy unit is within range, you can check your range by, on your right hand side of your unit card, you'll have your weapon and the range. For B1 droids, it's 1 to 3, and it has a white die. So this is something a lot of when people first start, they miss is that white die is per mini. So if you have, let's say, 8 minis in your unit, you roll 8 white die. If you upgraded to a heavy unit, they have their own die pool, and they use their die pool. So potentially you could have, let's say you have 8 minis, one of them is a heavy unit. You would have, let's say with the B1 droids, you would have 7 white dice, and then whatever the heavy unit rolls, let's say it's 2 black and 1 white. You would then have 7 white dice plus 1 white from the heavy, so that's 8 white dice and 2 black dice. And then you would determine hits based on, okay, is there cover, the heavy and light cover we talked before. You would then, determine, does the opponent have a dodge token? They can dodge one of those hits. And then if you rolled surges, look at your unit card, which is right below the green and yellow numbers on the right-hand side of the unit card will tell you if you surge to whatever. Some units surge to hit or surge to crit, and that basically means you change the surge icon on your die to a hit or a crit. The next action you can potentially do is aim. What aim does is it allows you to re-roll attack dice. So some units, the base is 2, but some units like Stormtroopers have precise 1, so they have 3. Some have precise 2, so they have 4. So just depending on the unit will determine on how many dice you re-roll. So the next action that you could do is dodge. This is on the defensive end. So you would get a dodge token, and when someone attacks you, you can spend a dodge token to cancel a hit. And that's what dodge does. Now, there are units that let you, if you spend a dodge, you can get another dodge with nimble. So there's lots of rules and deeper dive into that stuff. Now, if there's another action that you can do, but there's kind of a prerequisite for it. So let's say last turn your unit was shot, or even this turn they were shot before their activation, and they have a suppression token. You can do what is called a recover action. Okay, now this gets tricky because depending on the unit, if you have equal or more than your unit's courage, which is that yellow number on the right hand side, you're suppressed, which means you only get one action. So if you spend that action to recover to get rid of those suppression tokens, you only get that action for that turn. But let's say you have 2 courage, you have 1 suppression, you want to get rid of it, you can recover, that gets rid of the suppression. Recover also will flip any cards that, like, let's say there's a card that you have to tap or turn sideways in order to activate that card. A recover action flips that back to the normal so that you could use it again. So you could potentially, in a turn, recover and then attack or move or do whatever. Sometimes, though, you may only have a courage of 1 and all you can do is recover. And so we just want to, be aware of that. The final action that you can do is standby. So standby is basically saying, I'm going to wait and see what happens. And if something does happen, either I'm going to move or attack. So if I stand by, I can't attack. So I can move standby, I can aim standby, I could dodge standby, but I can't attack and then standby. Once you've attacked, standby's off the table. But let's say you moved up and you knew that your opponent was going to use a unit next. And so you wanted to catch them kind of using that unit and hopefully stop them from doing what they're doing. You could move up, place a standby token. Now, depending on whether your unit has Overwatch, your range is going to be 2 for measuring for standby, but with Overwatch, it could be 3. And what's going to happen is if your opponent moves or attacks and they're within range 2 of the unit that did the standby, after they complete their action, whether it's attack or move, you then get to do an action of move or attack. So potentially what could happen is, let's say you knew they were going to move, you move up standby, they decide they're going to move anyways, they move, they're within your range, you can now shoot them and attack them and hopefully kill some of them and stop them from what they were planning on doing. The other tricky bit of this is core units can have, any trooper unit, I believe, can have their standby shot off of them. So if I stand by and then you have a unit that shoots my unit with the standby, and they get a hit, the standby falls off. So just something a little tricky. We'll talk more about that and get into detail. The other thing you want to think about is line of sight. So this is basically, what can my mini see? And this is not from the leader. This is from every mini in your unit. So you measure range. So if I'm attacking, I have range 3, which means the unit is within the range 3 marker. Okay, I have range to them. Now let me see if I can see them. So what you're going to do is take a silhouette. These are the new things in Legion that actually allow you to determine whether you can see a unit. They have a cutout in the rules reference guide that you can find online for the silhouettes. Also, plenty of people sell 3D printed laser cut silhouettes. We have them on our site. And what you do is you put the silhouette behind each mini that you're trying to see if you have line of sight, and then you put you put a silhouette behind your minis to see if they can see and determine the line of sight from the top of the silhouette. And then each mini gets to look and see if they can see. So let's say half your unit was behind a wall. Well, the half that was behind the wall wouldn't be able to see, but the half that was outside of the wall would. Now, when you're determining cover, you want to look at the opposing player's unit and see, with all your minis, the way you with your cohesion, how many can you see? If you can see more than half, then they don't gain cover. If you can see less than half, then they do gain cover from that line of sight blocking thing. So let's say they're behind a building, you can only see less than half of them, well, they'll get heavy cover. Same thing applies to any other cover. If you trace a line from the top of your silhouette to the base of the opposing unit's mini, if it's behind cover blocking terrain, it gains that cover. And so if more than half of them are behind the cover, it gains that cover. So really, that is kind of in a nutshell of how we play. Just a real quick primer. What we're going to do next is, next week, we are going to get into building an army. We're going to have Mike Berry from the Notorious Scoundrels join us, and we're going to talk about building an army. And then what we're going to do is everything I kind of touched on today, we're going to deep dive into over the next few weeks. So stick with us. I hope you're enjoying it. There will be a companion blog to this on thefifthtrooper.com. So check that out. And have fun playing and join us next week. Thanks, everyone.
Join us next week for another edition of the Fifth Trooper Podcast.
This has been a Fifth Trooper production.